Hey everybody, this is Sheets, and I have Sean, aka Chan Zero, aka Sean from AceMind, and I'm doing this in response to actually several requests from the Discord channel to go through all this again because, as you guys know, I'm very transparent with what tools I use to build my lineups. I mean, you guys know I do SaberSim for almost everything, but I'm also very open to other sites and other tools. And whether it's being results oriented or whatever, I've used AceMind specifically for, well, golf showdown. And again, talk about results oriented stuff. I happen to have, taken down stuff using AceMind stuff. So it's only human to say, oh, good thing I did, right? Um, and people have asked me, to go over how I use AceMind, because so much of it, and I do this when I go through the SaberSim stuff, Sean, is so much of it is actually just knowing how to manipulate the site and how to click and how get some muscle memory for learning the technology. And you, as someone who's created this, I think you take that for granted sometimes. Like when I watch Blaine like rifle through the builds using AceMind, and my head is spinning. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, how did you know just click here, click here? Oh, I'm just going to data filter by this easy V look up here, and here we go. Because you're used to it. You're used to it.
Yeah.
You know where everything is, and it's not as big of a deal for showdown in football. But if you're going to use this like for NBA, for example, I mean, like 90% of what you do is being able to do it fast. So being able to know where you're going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through tonight's NFL showdown slate, and I'm going to use AceMind to build stuff. Now, you see, I already did it, but that's no fun. I'm going to do it again. But if I do another build, this is going to save somewhere, right?
Yep. So that'll stay in your results tab on the top there. All your past jobs will be stored in results.
Okay. Now, again, I'll encourage everybody if they want to see the history of AceMind. I did another video on this. Basically, these two freaking smart dudes were, trying to learn DFS. And the way I tell the story is kind of an exaggeration of the way you guys tell it. It's like these guys wanted to use Fantasy Cruncher, but they couldn't afford it. So they said, screw this, I'm going to make my own. So they decided to commit to building optimizers and simulators and things like that, to solve their own problems rather than having to go out elsewhere to do it.
Yeah.
Um,
Feels like forever ago, but it's treated us well over the years. So we decided
yeah,
to make the tools public and get them out to other people.
and in the world of Sims now, this is all very interesting to me, and specifically with Showdown because what DFS is, and I explained this to my son. I explained it to even to stock market people. It's an interesting thing, DFS, because it's always walking that tightrope and threading that needle between playing the best plays and playing the plays that are going to win you the most money. And it's depending on the sport, depending on the size of the contest. The answer to that question always changes. If you're playing a short slate NBA contest, projections are always very common. There's not too much difference, and you don't really have to do all that much, whatever. But you still have to run the risk of being duped somewhat, but it's not as big of a deal. But when you're dealing with, say, showdown football, where number one, the results are very event driven because of the touchdowns and things like that, and median projections are so not as important, let's say, as in basketball. And then you're dealing with this dupe situation where you only have 6 spots to fill in, and hundreds of thousands of people like playing these tournaments. The real question in all of DFS is, how bad of a lineup are you willing to play? That really is the question. What lineup has a chance to win, and a chance to win against as few people as possible, and threading that needle is, to me, it's extremely interesting. And I have tried and I continue to try. The thing is, it's an unsolvable puzzle, right now, which is part of what makes it fun. And I use SaberSim. I've used my own stuff. I've tried to do everything. You should see what I do with MMA. Okay, what I've done with these freaking with these SaberSim formulas, I've like changed them and scrape them and try freaking everything. And like everything else, it's kind of hard to judge how successful you are just based on results. You know, you have to think of some way. And what I would do in tennis, I would punish myself. Like I would do dupe push-ups. Like if I however many dupes I had in my tennis lineups, I would do push-ups on screen. You know, just to punish myself in a way. So in any case, what we're gonna do. We're not gonna talk about the sports at all. We're not gonna even talk about really the slate at all. We're just gonna start by just uploading stuff. So
Sure.
oh, fortunately, it's all here already. Okay, so we're going to import projections, and just to show you what I'm putting in. Okay, this is a sheet which people are kind of familiar with. I have name, fantasy points, ownership, and what I added for this one is captain ownership. Okay,
Yeah.
and I also, just for you guys, I added in my standard deviation. Okay, I usually don't always have this, but I know it's important.
Yeah, it's important for our sims because we generate a range of outcomes for players based on their standard deviation. And then the different flex ownership and captain ownership helps as well because obviously lineups will perform differently based on how owned somebody is at captain versus how owned they are at flex.
And what's good about this is, again, this is your test. Like when I upload my stuff, the more blue, the happier I am. You know, that
Yep.
means okay, I don't need to do that much more. So this field points, again, I'm not good enough right now to tell not tell the difference, but to do the difference between my projections and what I think the field is going to use as projections, right? So
Yeah. One thing I think it's probably easier to relate to you for like Showdown NBA, like perhaps, the main sites are projecting a rotation differently than what you're expecting and what you think is going to happen. You could set the field to have, that six rotational guy to be a lower fantasy point and boost yours up, and that'll help him score better in the Sims. But it's basically a way to say that I think the projections of the field aren't quite what is the reality, whether it's like an NBA rotational thing. Tonight there's some receiver issues with Romeo Dobbs out. It's a way for you to kind of have a take on the field per se, like an I know better spot,
yeah.
or like maybe you think Bo Melton or Malik Heath, one of the two is gonna do, outperform the other or get more snaps or something. You can project them differently in your Sims in the way they score versus what the field is.
So for now, what I just do is I just use my own projections as the field points.
Yep, and I think that's totally fine for 90% of people.
Yeah. So it uploads everything to here and it's all just thrown into here. And because I'm me, I usually tend to just go with defaults in like all these sites, whether it's SaberSim or whatever. My whole philosophy is you guys spend more time back testing this stuff than I do. And for me to try to override that without me really knowing the ins and outs of it is probably foolhardy. And as you would, say, I mean, probably okay for 90%, for a good percentage of the people. But just for fun, right? So what, if anything, you want to give like a quick summary of what all this is, and
Sure.
what you
Yeah.
might want to change if you felt like it?
Yeah, so real quick, like we back tested the large contest going back a few years, like the main slate contest, the big field stuff, going back and backfit that to these. So in general, like leaving them to default's probably fine. We back tested our correlations as well. Those are like player defaults for the last, couple of years as well. Simulations per field generation, that's how many times the contest sims each generation. So you can kind of think of generations as running multiple sims within one. So right now we have it set at 5 generations, 50,000 sims per generation. So it's going to run one contest simulation, hold over 5% of those top scoring lineups, because the way sometimes the sim works out is a low
Uh,
owned guy may appear more in the top ROI lineups just because of the nature of his being low owned. But since there's 5 generations, those lineups will get held over into the next generation. His ownership will obviously increase because we're holding them over. Then you won't score as well just because of the fluctuations in ownership. So you're basically running 5 different simulations, taking the best lineups from each and competing them in another field. And then at the end of the 5, you get that, output screen and it shows you, okay, out of 5 separate contest simulations, which lineups perform best across all of them. So it's a way to sort of take into account the diversity of the field and the way that the field's not exactly predictable, so that you're testing your lineup combinations against more combinations.
just for fun, what type of, let's ask you this one. Like, what type of slate would there need to be for me to screw with this? You know, like, what would be the character of a slate? I can't even imagine because you know what, as I mentioned earlier, I was trying to listen to Blaine's discussion of the NBA stuff, and my head was spinning. But I think like out of the corner of my ear, I was hearing something about if you wanted to like lock a guy in or something, you do something with the generations, or maybe I was getting two different things confused, or the holdover percentage. Like, what type of slate would cause me to change something with this, and what would I change it to, if anything?
So in general, I think like a good rule of thumb is the shorter a slate is, so like the Thanksgiving slate, maybe like a Monday to Thursday two gamer or even these showdowns. Basically, the more that duplication matters in a slate, the more generations you want to run because
Okay.
it's going to test different numbers of duplications lineups, different ownership combinations of lineups. So in general, the more generations you run, the better, but it matters more on shorter slates and especially showdowns.
And what about the lineup holdover percent, though?
I think 5% is probably a good number. It basically dictates. So if you have a 10,000 field lineup, 5% of that's going to be, 500 or whatever, and it's going to hold over that number of top scoring lineups into the next generation of Sims. I think five is generally a good number. Somewhere between 5 and 10 is fine.
So keep user lineups. Okay. So I have not created a lineup, right? I didn't import anything. I've just imported my projection. So what does this mean, this keep user lineups?
So if you don't add any lineups, whether they're from, Saber, Sim, or Fantasy Cruncher, you can upload from there. Or if you create like an optimizer set beforehand, you can upload those to the Sims as well to test how they do. But if you aren't uploading any lineups, then this has no effect whether it's on or off.
Got it.
It's just so like those multiple generations, if you did upload lineups from somewhere else or from our own site, it's going to hold over those lineups between each generation as well.
Okay, lineup scoring weight. Again, I would not even begin to mess with this unless somebody told me why I would.
Yeah, I mean this is one I've done a lot of experimenting with, and it obviously changes depending on the slate you're playing, the number of games in the slate, showdown or not. But basically, what this does is on your final screen, when we output those lineups to the table, this changes in which order they're ranked. So right now, it's ranked by 100% owner or ROI, meaning the highest ROI is going to show up there. However, like maybe on a showdown slate, you might want to target something like ownership or win percentage, where finishing in the top 1% or cashing a showdown lineup doesn't really do you much. So shifting some of the scoring rank from ROI to ownership and win percentage, like maybe 80% ROI, 10% ownership and 10% win percentage is going to rank those lineups differently and rank some lineups higher that have lower ownership and a higher win percentage.
That answered question I was going to get to when we download uh the results of this. Like, I had this from the previous run. And then like how is it ranking on the main page here? We'll get to that, I guess. So
Yeah, yeah. So
so
that's a way for you to sort of change the different type of lineup heuristics you want to play. So if maybe you're just playing a double up, you could change ROI to just projection or something like that, and
okay.
it'll rank them differently. And
So
then
this doesn't default based on what you're doing here. In other words, like this is going to be like this regardless of whether I'm playing a classic slate NBA or a showdown slate NFL.
Yeah, I
As
think
far as the
in
default.
general, 100% ROI is like generally just a fine ranking metric. Obviously the higher ROI a lineup is, the better. But in some scenarios like Showdown, where dupes are a thing and you can't, quite predict exactly how many dupes there are going to be,
Right.
sometimes getting lower on ownership or just banking more on the win percentage of a lineup rather than its ROI, which includes, like cash finishes, top 20% finishes. Sometimes you just want the win percentage in terms of calculating a lineup's score.
So for those of you that don't know, I mean, AceMind has a Discord channel as well where people are talking about this stuff all the time. I mean, I guess I'll ask you is, and based on you and Blaine and everybody in there, has there been any, like best practices? You know what I mean? That like say for a showdown, like what good percentages, not good, you know what I mean? What percentages people are using for say showdown?
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion on it about like how it changes between different sports and different slate sizes. For Showdown, I'll typically start at like 80% ROI, 10% ownership, and 10% win percentage. And I'll kind of play around with it, and that's kind of what I recommend like most people to do because it's not easy to grasp, especially like we built the thing and we kind of know what's going on, but
Right.
from an outsider perspective, it's kind of hard to tell what these different weights are going to do in terms of your output. So like what we sort of recommend some people to do is just start with one that's at 100% ROI, and then
Yeah.
run two more with the same exact other settings and change the numbers around and see how that affects the lineups you're getting and your output and which sort of suits the type of play style you want, whether it's more concentrated, more dispersed, more chalky with a higher win percentage, or whether you are taking like, long shots on these, min price players that have a chance to hit, but it's not very often.
Projection minimum is self-explanatory. Randomness. One.
Yeah, some people have some questions about this, so I guess I'll clear it up. Is if you're familiar with Fantasy Cruncher, they had their standard and their pro randomness. This would be like pro FC randomness. So it's doing randomness along a distribution curve rather than a flat percentage.
So you want to keep this the way it is, probably.
Yeah, I almost never change that from 100 unless
Uh,
I'm playing, like a three man or like a really small contest where you don't want a ton of randomness.
Minimum lineup salary. Okay. So for showdown, I mean, I have my own opinion, but I usually have no minimums, no maximums, like in anything.
Yeah, definitely you can drop it lower for showdowns for sure. And sort of how the way that salary is distributed in players' lineups where 80% of the field probably spends max salary, another 10% spends 100 or $200 below that, and it's sort of exponential the way it people play more salary. It's just kind of human nature. Our Sims mimic that. So even though you're setting the minimum salary to 40,000, it's not like half the lineups it's building are going to be 40,000 salary. Most of them are still going to be using a lot of salary because that's the way the field tends to play.
right. So I keep forgetting that we're not building necessarily our favorite lineups. What we're trying to build is what we think the field is going to do.
Right. Yeah. That's something that's kind of hard for people to understand because like, well, I want to X out these players from my player pool. I don't want to play them. But the thing is the field is still going to play them. So you want them accurately represented in
A
your
really good. That's a
wise.
really, really good point.
Right. So you may not like, Dontavian Wicks or Bo Melton tonight. But some people are going to be right. They're going to be owned. And if you exclude those from the field that you're simming, you're basically inflating the ROIs of, players around them because nobody's going to own in the field, but based on the way you set your player pool.
So that's an important thing to remind people of what we're doing here. Okay, from relative to what's going on with SaberSim. Okay, so like SaberSim, what you're doing, forget what you're doing. They have like the set fields that's like in the system already, right?
Correct.
So
Yep.
you're going to build lineups and then sim it against either that field or something else. But at least it starts with the field. What we're doing here is two things. Well, we're building the field ourselves, and that's an important distinction. That's a really important distinction, actually.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I think that sets us apart is all these settings that we're talking about on the right hand side, all the rules and correlations you can build, and even the data you input changes the way that field is going to be built. So with SaberSim, I'm sure they have a massive pool of lineups, and it's probably huge. But the thing is, you can't really change the way that that field was built. You're kind of stuck with that. Whereas with ours, you're able to change the way that field looks and the way that field behaves, and that results in different lineups and different combinations being better than others.
Well, I mean, you could change it. Say, I mean, you could build your own 5,000 lineup set, and then replace it. But
Sure, sure.
that's not the point. But yeah, and one of the things I speak to James about this from Pater, and we talk about this when it comes to building contest fields. One of the things that's I would say weak, but I'll say weak about the stock SaberSim fields that we have to kind of deal with is that presumes that like pretty much all the lineups there are good. You know what I mean? Like, and that's not, and when you build your own lineups and set that as your field, that's probably a weak approach because again, you're building 5,000 decent lineups because you're making them, right?
Yep.
And in reality, if you're going to compare lineups to a field, you have to create a certain percentage of the field as being terrible. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
so that's again when you're building it listen, it's more work, but if you want to be accurate or it's more accurate, you're building it from the ground up like we're doing here. I think at the end of the day, you'll make some errors, but you're at least comparing it to the right thing.
Yeah, there's more of a learning curve. It's harder to get into, which again is a downside. However, once you do get into it,
All right.
you sort of understand that you control and have way more, input on what's actually going on in the sim. It's not an entirely just like a black box giving to you that you're pulling stuff out of. It's something that you can see, change, and interact with.
Uh, Default cube. Now, would you, because it's a showdown, up the variance for any of these things or no?
So those values are only there if you don't provide a standard deviation, and that would
Oh,
apply a flat, for quarterbacks, 30% randomness, skill
oh,
position,
okay.
flat 40%. So as long as you have a standard deviation, those won't matter. But for people who don't have standard deviation, yeah, I would say that increasing variance on Showdown is definitely a good idea.
All right, there's no way I'm getting involved in this stuff.
I mean, yeah, we can chat about it real quick just so people
Yeah.
are aware of them. So position correlations, we have defaults baked in for the past, I think, 5 years, and that's just like a quarterback and a wide receiver are positively correlated, a quarterback and an opposing defense are negatively correlated. Um, you can change that. So, for example, somebody like Patrick Mahomes and Isaiah Pacheco aren't going to be as highly correlated as somebody like Brock Purdy and a healthy CMC are, where one running back generally takes production away from his quarterback and the other one is more synergetic. You can change the way that these are correlated. That'll change the way that those lineups score differently in the Sims.
And then we could change make the reality. The James Winston and the opposing defense are probably of a correlation of one. So that's
Yeah, exactly. And that's position wise, and then player correlations works the same way. Probably more useful in something like NBA, where like you can set two centers who fight for time as negatively correlated, and those lineups with those two centers will not perform well in the sim.
um, okay. So run and typically, now I don't know what you're familiar. So as far as time goes, this usually takes about. I mean, if I'm going to run 5 generations like this, why don't you predict like how long you think it's? I say about 2 minutes.
For the 88,000 lineup
More?
one for Showdown it's more just because combinations are a bit harder to generate. I would say probably 5 or 6 minutes.
Okay.
And obviously, the more generations you run, the more contest sims are going to get run. So obviously, it takes longer. I think the slant, like the $5 30,000 entry contest, is sort of like our baseline, and you can run 5 generations of that in about 5 minutes for the main slate.
Okay, so now here's another question more about your site. So while this is happening, I didn't even realize this was the case. Well, this can go on, and then you can still do other things, right?
Yeah, so we're running all this in the cloud. You could go back to Simonopto, change a few things, run another one, like change your lineup weights, change projections, run another one, go back, fire off 3 or 4 at the same time, and they'll all be done and finished in your results tab, and you can go and view them.
And can you do like other sports at the same time too? You just
Yep, yep. Different sports, different slates, doesn't matter. They'll all run.
and it's not going to affect the speed or anything.
Nope, they're all running on Google Cloud infrastructure.
It's just,
Just so they get their own little virtual machine to run in.
all right. So now where do I go back to? I
So
just
if you
started
go,
this
if you
basketball one.
click,
So how do I get back here?
yeah, if you click the results tab up top, it'll take you to a view where you see all of your past ones. So on the right, you can see
Ah,
that those two are still running, and then below you have all your complete jobs.
so we'll see what's happening here. So it generated 21,696 lineups. Why now is that why?
That's including duplicates. So that's the number of unique lineups in the field.
Okay. Um, all right. So when that so I'll let this run. So when that happens, all right, it's going to produce two different what's the word I'm looking for. Two different views that you can do. One, it's going to give you this list of like say, it's going to give you a list of we'll get to there in a second. But it's going to say 20, you can check 20 lineups. Yes, for some reason, 88 lineups. Uh,
Yeah, the $8.88 entry max.
is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Here we go. And then 150 lineups, and then it's going to give you, and this is I don't say new, but this is at least in the last year. It's going to let you go to more min uniques two or whatever it is, and then
Yeah,
it'll allow you to export directly from there.
Yeah, it's kind of like our lineup builder. So if you're running three lineup, like a 3 max, a 20 max, a 150 max, we have all those presets and a custom preset, so you can, pick however many lineups you want to. But it's basically a way for you to build a set of lineups for people who aren't like super into Excel or don't have like a post-processing thing set up for themselves. It's a way for them to filter out lineups, set exposure, set uniques, filter out players from different positions and doing it all on our site and being able to export that and take it directly to their entries file. It's something it's easier way for our users to build lineups.
So let's compare, by the way. Let's compare the football to the basketball as far as, well, look at basketball. It's
Yeah, I say
flashy.
the fadeaway is a bit smaller or a lot smaller than the NFL one, so it's going to run quicker. Yeah, and I will say if people are interested in using the tools, we're running promo code or a Black Friday deal still. If you use, promo code BF30, you'll get 30% off your first month. So I think our pricing is already pretty
How
generous,
much, how much, how much, how
$75.
much, how much is it, by the way?
Yeah, so our pro package, everything included, NFL projections, sim and optimizer is $75 a month. So 30% off of that's going to be like another 20 some dollars off. So like $50 for a whole month worth of sim tools for all sports.
Is it the can you prepay for a year or anything like that? Or
Yeah, we have a yearly package as well. And the BF30 code applies for that as well. So I think it's 750 for a year. So that would bring it down to like 500, I think, for a year of sim and opto tools with the Black Friday deal.
I think it's important also to clarify and to just emphasize. I have no revenue share thing with
Yeah.
AceMind. I,
No,
I get nothing at all. As a matter of fact, I am a completely full 100% paying person, and I always did it this way with any. I just people when I got into DFS, the only reason I started doing content, people started asking me. People remember me from poker. They said, "Dude, you're playing DFS. What are you doing?" I'm like, "Okay, you want to know? This is what I do." And as I learn new things, I just kind of pass it on. Um,
yeah. The only affiliation here is sort of symbiotic, where I get to understand the tool from your perspective and help explain it, and then obviously you get, understanding from my side as well.
what other sports here? I should be able to just go here and see, right?
If you go to Sim and Opto, only for the sports that have slates currently. But yeah, these are the sports that we support: NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, and MMA.
So yeah, you'll get
Year
you'll have
round, baby.
you'll have fun with NHL when you do that.
Yep.
I
I
mean,
think tennis too. Tennis is probably coming when that, starts picking up again.
yeah, tennis is boring, but NHL is NHL will be a fun one. Like, what I like to track is like the delta between what the builds look like pre-sim and what the builds look like post-sim. Like basketball is all the same shit.
Yeah, we looked into getting some NHL started too, but I mean, man, there's so many different rules and correlations to consider for that. It's
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
bit more complex than
Oh
something
no, look at
tennis.
this.
What do we got here?
Job exceeded max one. Oh no, it's preparing now. Okay.
Yeah, it's preparing. We're good.
Whew, okay.
Saved by the bell.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the view you're talking about. So what we do is we take your lineup, that CSV file, we upload it to a temporary database, and that allows us to do these different filters and queries on it for setting exposures, excluding players, doing uniques, all that stuff.
Okay. So here. These are some of my questions. So let's go. Let's put 150 lineups in here. Okay. Let's leave it at min unique one for the time being. So
Okay.
this is currently ranking by ROI.
So
No,
it's ranking
not.
by lineup score.
All right. So let's see, where is that?
That
Where?
should be all the way to the right.
Okay. And what lineup score is, I guess, is determined by those settings that we put.
Yeah, those
As far as
weights.
what is ROI? Oh, okay. So that's
So
interesting.
yeah, so it's taking 80% of the ROI score, 10% of the ownership score, and 10% of the win percentage score, and putting that all into one value and ranking it by that.
Okay. So this is now, all right. So you have this look right here, and I can download this. But the other thing that I want to look at is this thing, this download all lineups. All right. So
Yep.
when you download this, the top 150, and we'll just do it to show you. It even says refined lineups in the title. All this is doing, not this is bad, but all this is doing is it's saying, okay, these are the 150 lineups in a format that you can upload it to DraftKings or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
like your portfolio.
Now, this lineup, download all lineups. What this is doing is it's giving you all like 10 million lineups, whatever that you created. Okay.
Yeah. So
And
it's going to have every single entry from every generation of contest. So we ran 5 generations of, 20 or 30,000 unique lineups. Those will all be here. So it'll be, 60, 80, 100,000 lineups in here.
okay, so now this is where I have been wasting like 90% of my time. Okay.
Sure.
Is how to X stuff out, how to filter what is most important, what is whatever. First question I have before I even get into this is how is it being ranked like right now?
The way that it's exported default out of the sim is if you have imported lineups, those will show up first. Otherwise, it's just in the order that they're generated. So you can see these are all like a ton of negative ROIs. I'm sure they'd have negative lineup score too. This is just the order that they were generated in. So I would start by, obviously sorting by the lineup score.
Well, so hold on. So Y is lineup score, right? Okay.
Yep.
See, I didn't know. See, that was one thing I didn't know. So one thing again. Okay, so if you went like this and sorted starts large to smallest, ostensibly you would get the same top 150 as would be in that other view. Okay.
Yeah, as long as on your other set you didn't set any rules or
Min uniques
exposures
two,
or
min uniques
yep.
whatever. Okay. So here are some other things that you can try to do. The first thing I try to go to is anything with regarding dupes. Okay. So the first thing I would look at is sim dupes. Now, sim dupes, I guess, is very simply the amount of times but the lineups show up. This lineup shows up in the sims in
Yeah,
total.
correct.
So, like for example, if I sorted this largest to smallest, wait, that wasn't min dupes. Whereas these are total sim dupes. So for those of you that were watching, so we had 5 different generations, right? So that's why the median dupes is just something different than. So I guess sim dupes would be
It's an average.
that's the average amount of times
Yep.
of the 5, and 244 would be the median dupes.
Yeah, and that's why we sort of included like a median and a standard deviation. So you could understand like there's a range, right, of possible duplications. Some might have a higher median and a lower standard deviation. Some might have a lower median and a higher standard deviation. Like, the incidence of duplication is not, there's different ranges to it.
So here's, I guess this would be like my first quiz to myself. So if I sorted this by sim ROI, okay, um, if I sorted this by sim ROI, I know that it would not be the same ranking as the lineup score because we did not have 100% ROI. However, if we did have 100% in ROI, I would imagine that the sim ROI rating would be the same as the lineup score rating.
That is exactly correct.
Okay.
And since we still had 80% ROI as the ranking, they'll be similar. But obviously there will be some differences depending on the ownership and the win percentage of those lineups. Those lower owned and higher win percentage lineups might rank better given their ROI. But yeah, exactly. If you had 100% ROI in your ranking, the lineup score and the sim ROI would be the same whether you sorted them up or down.
Okay. Another thing that people are used to me kind of fiddling with is geomean, which I do with SaberSim, and I have my own calculator with this. But you guys already preloaded. Okay. After this is all done, you have it preloaded. So what you still, you guys should do. I'm not going to display it here, but to figure out what geomean you're looking for. I mean, there's a plenty of it's on my side. You could even do it on your own. You could attempt to calculate based on how many people are in the tournament. Let's say this one, what was it, 88,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you want to limit it to say, and this is all guessing, right? And if you want to say like a number of dupes, say 10 or less, you'd be looking for a geomean of 22. And you guys could just figure this. This is a very simple formula. You guys could figure this out. But so once you know what geomean at least you're looking for, you could just go straight to here and I mean, if you wanted to, you sort by geo mean, and then again, it's the same type of push and pull. You don't really want the highest geo mean, especially if you're looking for something under 25. But then again, you don't want to give up, something with a high ROI either. So
Yeah.
it's and any. I guess I'll ask you. I mean, and any best practices by playing with all this stuff? Because I mean, listen, I try a lot. I mean, I try to. I mean, I'll look and I'll see. Obviously, I'll see. Oh, look at this one. There's a geo mean of 35, but a hugely negative sim ROI. I mean, I don't want that. You know, um,
Right.
or
One
just
thing I Yeah, one thing I sort of use GeoMean for in ownership in general is just to look at what type of rosters are going to be chalky and what the field is going to play. So when you had that sorted by GeoMean descending, you could see that Dontavian Wicks came up in most of those lineups. So that to me sort of indicates that people are spending down at receiver, and that receiver is going to be Dontavian Wicks, and that in general that he's going to be a popular pick for most people. So maybe finding a pivot to Bo Melton or Malik Heath, or just playing, Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft without him. Those are ways that I could foresee to be different.
I mean, for me, I mean, I just start by with the sim dupes, and I mean, I don't care what anything else is. If this is going to sim with all, I mean, I have to cut it off somewhere, right? So you could even just go, whatever you want. I mean, there's no way that if something's going to sim at more than 20 dupes, I'm going to play it. I mean, not in a million years, but what do I know? You know what I mean? Like, but but
Yeah.
but
Generally, the way that I rank lineups with, giving points to ownership in that lineup score, I typically don't run into those, and if I do, I'll filter them out. And this is something I do it on our site. I kind of find it easier, but I'll limit my captain pool to the captains I want to play. I'll limit my primary and secondary stacks. So for example, like I might not want to play 5-1 lineups. I could exclude those from my lineup set. Then I'll set my flex exposures as well.
so you make your okay. This is again philosophical. So you before you run this stuff, you make your lineups the way you think you'd want them to be, or
No, on the output that lineup table we were looking at where you downloaded all lineups, that's where I'll build my lineups. So for example, if you click the filter button below captain there, this allows you to exclude or only include certain captains. Like you might want to only have Amon-Ra, Jordan Love, Jaden Reed as your captain. So you would unselect them all and just click those three
and
and then
then
hit
would
apply.
it refill it for a new 150?
Yep.
Oh, that's great. I never knew you guys did. Okay, that was one of the big benefits of SaberSim is that you can X out here. And this is again, whether it's from AceMind or Saber, this is a very important point, about people asking when do I X guys out? Do I include them? I might X people out, but I always, X out from at the end, not at the beginning.
Correct. Yeah. You still want them in your sim because like we said, you're creating a field. You're not creating your lineups.
Yeah, and not only that, it also it protects you from like building like from having really just terrible lineups. Like
Yep.
at least from here, you at least have 5,000 or however many you have, like reasonable lineups to choose from. And I've tried it. I've tried. I don't care. I don't care what. I'm not playing. I'm not St. Brown. I'm just not doing it. I'm Xing them out pre-build or whatever it is. You're going to end up with like a whole bunch of bad, bad lineups.
Sure.
And you'll give up. And you know what you do? You give up the lineups that have I'm not St. Brown with like 5 low owned guys, that you would
Exactly.
probably
Yeah.
would want. So you can go straight from here. So let's just say we don't want to play uh, Packers defense or something.
Sure. Yep.
I don't know how many. Is it going to say how many it changed or no? Probably not.
No, so I'm sure there probably weren't any Packers defense, but if you click on a player in the table, like click on a player's name, it'll show you on the right side what their ownership is.
Okay.
So you've got 7% golf captain and 61% flex right now.
So it's interesting. So when we looked at this, and remember we did that kind of when we looked at the geo mean stuff, you noticed that okay, as a result of what we looked at, Dontavian Wicks is going to be very very popular. Okay,
Yeah, and it looks like the Sims here are saying play the cheap wide receiver, but do it on the other side. Play Tim Patrick.
right.
And we see a lot more Jaden Reed, we see more Christian Watson, and we see more Tucker Kraft as opposed to Dontavian Wicks. So the Sims are sort of finding a way to maintain that sort of median projection and ceiling projection, but lowering the ownership of it.
And do you do anything with as far as minimizing, excuse me, of capping salary? We talked about it briefly before, but with Showdown, do you do that proactively, or you don't even worry about it?
It depends on the field size. For like an 80,000 person contest, yeah, I will. So if you scroll a bit to the right on this table, you'll see the salary column, and you can it's towards the left now. Yeah, right there towards the middle now. You can set a filter there on the salary column and say salary less than or equal to 49,800, 49,500, something like that.
And interestingly, I mean, like, when you just even look at this for 2 seconds, I don't see any 50,000 in the top ones anyway.
Yeah, and that again, that's sort of the nature of the Sims. They're finding ways to be unique to the field, less duped in the field without giving up too many points.
So let's just flex this and see how this. So you had Min Uniques 2, it'll redo these. Now, I guess similar to Saber Sim, eventually, maybe not because you have so many lineups, but
Yeah,
eventually it's going to
you'll still get
crash.
a one. Yeah, you'll still get 150 lineups with I think 4 or 5 uniques if you don't change any exposures. But once you start setting min and max exposures with a lot of uniques, then you'll get to a point where you only get maybe 100 lineups that meet your requirements and out of your 150.
So one of the things that I would recommend, if maybe you guys have it already, one thing that I do with pretty much every slate that I play, every sport, is I will go min uniques more than one, and the question is how many more, as usual. And what I do with the Saber Sim is I keep kind of this aggregate metric going where it can always track my average projection of the whole portfolio,
Yeah.
or the average ROI of the whole portfolio. And so, I mean, I'll just show you for example. I don't even know where it is, but somewhere. So just to show you what I mean, it's got to be somewhere. Is
Even
is
with a good
that
idea.
it'll list it, and then what happens is if I start a Min Uniques 1, for example, where is it? I could do it. I didn't run the Sims yet, but I could put it somewhere. Um,
I kind of get what you're saying though,
yeah,
where as you
yeah. So,
increase uniques, you have to play worse players, and then that drops the average, projection, average ROI of your lineups.
right. So the point is that like what I do with this before I even sim anything. See, it says I average just in 269, right? So then I'll go down to Min Uniques 2, and then I'll just see how much that affects it, if at all. Then it goes to 269. And eventually you get to a point where it just kind of crashes. And I have to figure out what that is. Like how big of a crash means that I shouldn't be any more unique. So I think
Right.
that again, like whenever you make any kind of change, like if I X a guy out, for example, what's that doing? Not just what's that doing to my whole portfolio? If I X out Almon St. Brown, how is that impacting my overall ROI of my portfolio? So that's something maybe to consider.
No,
Um,
that's a good idea. Yeah, I'll add that to the list.
yeah, but listen. I give this speech all the time. I mean, there's different levels of analyzing DFS. What one is just from a player perspective, and then second is like from a DFS player perspective. And then you move up. It's whether he's good today with a good salary or whatever. And that's what 90% of content is out there, is people saying who's a better play X or Y, right? And you can't win like that. If you want to be a good advanced beginner, at least you'll at least look at it in terms of lineups and not in terms of players. Like a player could be like kind of a shitty play, but you put him in with put other guys around him for other reasons, and it can be part of a good lineup. And that is what's makes a good player. But I think like really next level, and this is for my own business, my hedge fund or whatever, my is and this is what the Sims can help you do, is to not even look at it from a lineup perspective, but to look at it from a portfolio perspective. Like a player might be like good as part of like the whole portfolio of lineups, and lineups themselves, can work kind of just okay by themselves, but work really well like together, and so that's going to be it's going to be fun to see when that analysis starts happening. So that's what happens in portfolio management, even with hedge funds, is what happens is it goes from stocks to stocks not being, in the same portfolio, to then people that are really rich that they want to invest in multiple hedge funds. They'll say, how does this overall portfolio work with another portfolio? And
Exactly. Yeah.
then, then we're really in business. Um,
Along the lines of like portfolio management too is like exposure tracking, right? Like if you have a wealth portfolio and 60% of that's Apple, you might think that I'm over allocating there and there's risk there. Maybe I only want 30% Apple. And the DFS works the same way as well. Is Tim Patrick a good play? Sure, maybe. I don't know. But the exposure you have to him compared to what everybody else has him at matters, right? If Tim Patrick is 5% and you have 10%, it's different than if he's 10% and you have 10%.
in addition to that, I mean, I was talking to Bobby about this yesterday, and it also, whether something's a good lineup, it obviously depends on what tournament you're playing, right?
Sure.
You'll be willing to take on like mass risk for certain things, and also, what in some sense depends on sort of what your bankroll is also a little bit, you know.
Well,
Uh,
it's how you like to play too, right? If you have a super concentrated portfolio and it hits, you're winning a lot. I mean, it's a much riskier portfolio. You have to be able to experience more downturn, but when it does work, it works. Compared to if you have a really, balanced exposure, really widespread exposure, you're going to have more hits, but they're not always going to win, right? You'll have more chances at winning, but not, concentrated, if that makes sense.
so just for fun, the NBA thing was done, and you could do, and we don't need to do this, but you could do the exact same thing. It's got everything here, and this was, did it build my lineups? Oh, I didn't even run it yet.
I think you did. If you go to
Yeah, I did.
results, you did.
Oh, there
Yeah,
it is.
this one.
So it's the same thing. It's generating the table.
Yeah, it works the same way for all sports. You can set your number of lineups, your uniques. You can do those same filters up top we were looking at with like, I don't want to play, I don't want to play Luca at utility, for example, depending on other stuff. You can filter out all these different plays, set your salary, set your projection filters, dupe filters, all that
Hey,
stuff.
and you can't do rules though, really, right? I mean, can you? And I was struggling with this earlier. Like if I didn't like on today's slate, you're probably going to get like a decent handful of lineups with both Zach Collins and Charles Bassey in it, right? Just because that's the way it is. But if you're like a true purist who doesn't feel like playing two centers like together, you know, uh, it's you could obviously set a rule beforehand and then upload those lineups here. But can you do that from here, like from the lineups? You can exile one, but you
Yes,
can't
we
exile
don't
both.
have we don't have that rule implemented yet after the fact, but there are two ways to do it beforehand. One is like you said, using an optimizer or whatever you want to build lineups with that rule. The other way is those player correlations we were talking about in the sim. You could set Zach Collins and Charles Bassey to be, -1 correlation, and
That's
that would
pretty
ensure
cool,
that they don't
actually.
show up together.
That's actually very cool to do that.
Yeah, I do want to add rules to this though, because it is nice just to be able to, especially with NBA where you have to be quick, you don't have time to always change stuff and run a new sim. So I'm planning on adding rules to this like that.
What about
They aren't there yet.
do you have late swap?
Yep, late swap for NBA, late swap for NFL.
Um, we can't really demo that right without the slate though.
No,
One
and
of
it,
these,
it is sort of involved too. So like on DraftKings, you have to download your current contest standings. So like that contest CSV and then your current entries file. And then what we actually do is instead of late swapping your sims against a random field, we actually swap them against the field you're playing against. So all possible combinations of your players of your fields lineups will generate five different fields based on their salary remaining and what players could fit. So we're basically taking five guesses at somebody's lineup based on projection and the salary they have remaining, building those lineups for the field, and then creating five portfolios for you as well, and simming each of those portfolios against the lineups we think the field has.
I'm gonna try to demo that myself, maybe tonight or one of these nights, just to see how much of a struggle it is. You know what I mean? For me not having done it before.
Yeah, we do
That's
have a
that case.
video.
I'm sure.
Um, yeah, we have a video in our Discord of Blaine doing it because I mean it is sort of like it's not an entry level thing. I guess you have to download a couple files and make sure things are set up correctly. But yeah, I think it's really powerful because as far as I know, we're the only ones who sim your late swap lineups against the actual contest you're playing rather than just like a pre-built field, which obviously matters more depending on which contest you're playing. Guys are obviously, better plays are typically higher owned and smaller field stuff, and the way that your contest actually plays out once the cards flip matters.
And that's, I mean, I could talk for hours about that. I mean, that's the advantage in late swap, especially with the with with you guys and SaberSim and everybody now being able to access, you know, this and scrape the scores midstream and the ownership midstream to be able to rebuild everything with that information. I mean, I'm just saying that if you don't do that, you're just not playing optimally. I'm not saying you can't win not doing that, but you're certainly asking for trouble, like giving up that edge to the people that are doing it. That I'll kind of leave it at that. But yeah,
Yeah, and I'm totally with you there.
it's very difficult. Yeah, I mean that's why the NBA is tough. You got to commit to being there all night. I mean, to being there all night long. That just is what it is. And if you don't like that, play League of Legends or tennis or
Play
or
PGA.
or which one?
Play PGA. You got a whole weekend to tilt your bad
PGA is
lineups.
beautiful. And then, well, listen, you tilt when the guy with when Hideki withdraws, but everybody's whatever it
Yeah,
is.
you just go back in for the showdown, round two, round three, and it's all
Yeah.
better.
How have you guys been doing with the And again, when I say how you've been doing, I mean, I haven't really tried with you guys the MMA stuff yet. Again, MMA to me is like just all about freaking dupe avoidance and this type of stuff. And you got any feedback on MMA yet?
Yeah, we've had people use our tools for MMA. I think it comes down to a similar thing like Showdown, where with MMA, the combinations of fighters you have and the dupes you have, it matters a ton. And being able to sim that and get a range of possible duplication outcomes, this lineup's duplicated 30 times in one sim, but it's only 15 in another. And basically just doing that and seeing what the field looks like, obviously, and then the combinations of fighters you have, I think our sim does really well.
You know what you guys have in it. It hasn't prevented me from doing it. That was kind of uh, a barrier to me doing it. Is you had a separate input that you wanted specifically for KO probability, um, which was weird to me, because you know KO probability as opposed to sub probability or as opposed to takedown probability. It seems that all that stuff would be factored into the projections and the range of outcomes from the projections, and it wouldn't need a separate input. But I don't what's the logic behind specifically a KO probability being required to make this go?
Yeah, so you're right in that those different scoring outcomes are factored into a median projection. But if you think about the distribution of a fighter, especially one that's, more evenly matched, is they'll have like a sort of a double camel hump distribution where if the fighter loses a fight, they're going to be scoring most of their points in a cluster that's a bit lower. But if they win the fight, they get the bonus and all that other stuff. And they score points clustered more towards the higher end. So you have this double bell-shaped distribution where one end's lower and one end's higher. What the win percentage and the KO probability allows us to do is accurately project that distribution of the two different scoring outcomes. Whereas traditionally, if you just have a median outcome and a standard deviation, there's just one bell curve in the middle, and that's just kind of not the way. It's the same with tennis. It's just not the way they score. They either score
That's
clustered
fine.
lower or clustered higher.
That's fine. But I would also then, if you're going to do that, I wouldn't distinguish KO from sub. I mean, I would, you know what I mean? Like a sub, it's similar, right?
It goes into win probability, yeah. So win probability is TKO, sub, win by decision, and then KO factors in the different round bonuses for like early finish or like a knockout.
Um, Talk about this some other time. I think we're missing something. But okay. Because it says 0 to 1 and wins by KO, but again, if you get a sub, you get that bonus in the same way that you get a KO.
It's probably just a naming convention that we're
Okay,
mismatched
so
on,
what this and so if you told me to say
maybe like finish probability.
okay, so that makes a lot
Yeah.
more sense to me.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew we were disconnected somewhere. I think that's
Yes.
probably it.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So now I can do this because I do have finish probability, so I can put
Yeah.
this because it seemed weird to me to distinguish KO from other ways that the fight finishes. Okay.
One's just a win and the other one's a finish.
Very good. Um, okay. Listen, thanks for the catch up. When I really have my 100% focus, I'll have Blaine come on and talk about the NBA with me. I have to, you know what? It'll be fine if he watches me click. Because if I watch him, I'll have a headache. So, oh no, it's easy. Watch this. I'll put my right finger over here. I'll left click over here and put 75 tables together. You know, so,
Yeah,
um,
we sort of get lost in the UI sometimes just because we're so familiar with it.
all right. Well, listen, encourage everybody to check you guys out, and that'll do it. Thanks a lot, Sean.
Yep. Good luck on your lineups tonight.
Later.